Hi, this is Joe Kramer, and you're listening to the Sirens of Audio.
Please leave a review for us on Apple Podcasts. And please like, share, subscribe, and comment on our YouTube videos. Then you shall be like us. G'day audiophiles, this is the Sirens of Audio, the show that explores Doctor Who on audio. I'm Dwayne.
And I'm Philip. G'day Dwayne, g'day audiophiles.
G'day Philip. We've got a good one lined up today, haven't we?
Oh, all of ours are good, Dwayne, but yeah, this one's a special
I know, I
one.
keep saying that every time. We should just take it for granted that they're all good, but it's good to announce it too.
Yes, this is a special one.
It is a very special one. We're going to be speaking with none other than Nicola Bryant this evening. And it's an era that's very special to me, the era that she appeared in. So it's going to be lovely to speak with her later on, Philip.
Yes, very much looking forward to it.
Yeah, and I've been listening to a couple of audios featuring her today. So in fact, one of them I'm going to recommend later on. So I guess you've been listening to a couple of Peri audios as well in preparation for this?
But I regularly listen to them anyway. Because,
yeah.
I'm particularly Peri and... Oh, I've forgotten already.
The piscon paradox.
Yes. The companion character. No, I was actually thinking the other companion.
Ehrman.
Yeah, so, I think those two together, I just adore all their stories.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great dynamic.
It really
Very
is.
interesting when they throw extra companions in with the companions that we only saw on their own on television. So
That's right.
we get a fantastic new dynamic. But before we get to our chat with Nicola, do you know what, Philip?
No, what, Dwayne?
It's time to jump down that rabbit hole. Let's go. Now, Philip, today, I know this is probably going to be pointless to tell you, but yesterday I received my copy of the Season 22 Blu-ray because it's recently been released in Australia. I think this week at the time of recording, may have been out a month or two by the time this goes out. But I only just got it.
So remind me again, what's Blu-ray?
Yeah, nice one. Nice one, Philip. Nice one. And Season 22, as I said, is very special to me because this was broadcast in the UK in early 1985. Attack of the Cybermen started. So Doctor Who back in those days was hitting Australian television about 12 months after, wasn't it?
About that, yeah.
Yeah. So it would have been 1986 when I saw this. So where was I? Second year in high school, saving up my... actually, when Season 22 hit Australian television, I was still taping them with my audio cassettes, putting a tape recorder next to the TV and recording them. So I had particularly copies of Vengeance on Varos and Revelation of the Daleks from that season, but I caught most of the other stories on TV on transmission. So it's probably one of the first seasons that I caught most of it on transmission. So it's very sentimental to me. And because Revelation of the Daleks has always been one of my very favourite classic serials, and it's probably the serial that got me fully entrenched into Doctor Who fandom. I had a little computer, so I was teaching myself BASIC, and I did myself a basic computer language Dalek on my little PC that I had at the time. So, yeah, very influential on me, that story. It's funny, though, because I'm not a huge Dalek fan, but I think it was Davros and Terry Malloy's portrayal of Davros in that really stuck out to me. And there were some pretty shocking moments in that season too. So overall, season 22 is extremely important to me personally in my Doctor Who fandom. I want to know, Philip, is there a particular era or season for you that was important or most important to you to kick you off in Doctor Who fandom?
Well, I guess I started watching during the era of constant repeats, and I first came in, it would have been Tom Baker's second series. So I think it was actually, I can't quite remember. I was in hospital, I'd had my appendix out, and the TV was showing in the kids' ward, because there's just one TV for all the kids to watch in those days, no individual TVs to watch. And someone had put Doctor Who on. It was either Planet of Evil or Pyramids of Mars. And I remember just getting caught up and going home when there was a cliffhanger. And so needing to rest up at home, having had the surgery. And that's when I started watching it. And yeah, so from then on, I think the ones that really hit me particularly were the first Leela ones. So we pretty quickly moved into Robots of Death and Talons of Weng-Chiang. Just wowed me like crazy. And they just really hit me in the face. And at the end of Talons of Weng-Chiang, it went back to Spearhead from Space. And we suddenly went back to John Pertwee, which I didn't quite understand what was going on. I'd assumed... I think at that stage I probably bought my first Target book, which was The Web of Fear with Patrick Troughton. So I realised at that point that Doctors regenerated or looked different. And I'd assumed that Tom Baker became John Pertwee. And so for watching all of John Pertwee, I was convinced that this was the next Doctor. And so then when John Pertwee regenerated at the end of Planet of the Spiders, I thought, oh no, another Doctor. And it hadn't clicked, because when he's lying there, Tom Baker's lying on the floor, you can't really recognise it's Tom Baker. So it wasn't actually until the next episode and Tom Baker gets up, I went, oh, okay. And then I had to try and put all my Time Lord lore together. So, and I was about 10 at the time, so it was all a bit complex. But those, as I said, those seasons just went over and over again. I think that the next time we got, it kept going, and we then went into season, whatever the latest first full season is, whether it be
15.
15? Oh no, 15's the...
Yeah, 15.
Okay, good. I'll believe you. 16 is the key
to
time,
time.
is it?
Yeah.
So 15. So then went into 15, and then when it got to the end of 15, then went back to John Pertwee again. And so just doing that constant lap over and over again.
Were they still skipping all the master stories at that time?
Yeah, skipping. It went from Spearhead to Space straight to Day of the Daleks.
Right.
Basically 2 entire years just skipped in one go, which was just bizarre. But that's really when I fell in love with Patrick Troughton and the 3 Doctors.
Right. And
so in 86, when they actually then went back and actually had 2 Patrick Troughton stories as the start of the loop, and I organised for my parents to buy a video recorder before that started. And so in 86, we got our first VCR and recorded the two Patrick Troughton stories, and then kept recording after that. And those tapes cost a fortune.
I think it was not long after Revelation of the Daleks screened in Australia, actually, that they showed those black and whites. Because I remember that the Mind Robber was the first one they showed in that set of 2, wasn't it? It was the Mind Robber first, and then the Crotons.
That's right.
And the Mind Robber absolutely blew me away, particularly that cliffhanger with the TARDIS exploding.
I know. That first episode, is just, as a kid, I still adored it.
Yeah.
Just adored it.
Yeah, I did too. And those white robots, they grabbed my imagination straight away. So interesting going from season 22 into those 2 stories.
Yes.
Oh, they were really weird with the screenings back then, weren't they?
They were, but by that stage they were now showing the Masters, but in black and white.
Yes, that's right. And
but not the first episode of the Invasion of the Dinosaurs. It started with episode 2.
Episode 2.
It took me years before I got to see the first episode of Invasion of the Dinosaurs.
Yeah, same here. But they were also showing black and white season 7 as well. So
that's right.
That was pretty cool to.
It was brilliant
to see. And yes, certainly some of the season 7 I was recording off the television as well. So I had episodes of the Silurians that I would play over and over, that I can still almost say word for word. So, yeah, it was a very special time, that mid-'80s period. Sounds like it was for the both of us.
It was, yeah. The TV show, buying the Target books, attending some fan stuff. I mean, I saw Tom Baker live signing books when I was 10 or 11. I knitted myself a Tom Baker scarf, which I still have, full of really bad knitting holes and things. And then Peter Davis and his wife came out to Australia. Janet Fielding, I've got a picture of me with Janet Fielding when I'm about 13 or 14.
Nice.
So I think that's probably my first picture with someone. Because I didn't get pictures with either Tom Baker or Peter Davison, but I've got pictures with Janet Fielding.
Cool. Very good. Well, I just wanted to, and of course, that period was Peri as well, which is very relevant to this episode. And I was actually thinking about it. Did you know that with Tegan being Australian and Peri being an American character, there was a gap between Sarah Jane Smith and Mel where there were no English companions, no British companions at all. They were either aliens or other nationalities. So it was a long period without a British companion. Or, yeah, well, Leela was human, but a human from the future. So very interesting. Never really thought about that before.
Well, there you go.
All right, with that random thought, let's climb out of the rabbit hole. Shall we throw in a trailer for Peri and the Piscon Paradox?
Yeah, we're going to talk about it soon.
Let's do that, and we'll come back in a moment with Nicola Bryant.
Coming soon from Big Finish Productions. Doctor Who, The Companion Chronicles, Peri and the Piscon Paradox.
Hi, I'm Peri. Hi. I'm Dr. Purpa Gilliam Brown. I'm a first-year botany student at Cal State. I'm 40-several years old. I travel with my friend, the doctor, and I'm currently resting between my third and fourth marriage and my 91st and 92nd diet. But here's the twist. We left the TARDIS. The doctor was holding a small black device like a TV remote, pointing at Santa Monica Bay, and the device chirped. Alien technology. That must be him. Come on, Peri! The game's afoot! Something walked over my grave. I turned and saw a woman looking at me from across the street, but I'm sure my mind is playing tricks. The girl I see looks far too young to be me. My God! What was I wearing? I can't help myself. I just have to meet her.
I am Major Zorn of the Piscon Law Enforcement Squad. Where is Zal?
I rushed around the back of the deli counter and ran out. I ran, wobbling in my unsuitable shoes. My God, I thought. I'm being hunted down by fish. How heroic. How stupid.
Something happened here, Peri. Something that gave you two futures.
Subscribers get more at bigfinish.com.
Although the Doctor has had many companions over the years, few as integral to the era as Peri is to the Sixth Doctor. And when you think of the Sixth Doctor, you can't help but think of Nicola Bryant. Nicola, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for asking me. I've been looking forward to this for a long time.
Yeah, it has taken a while, but I'm so glad we finally got you.
Brilliant. Well,
looking like you're in glorious weather over there. Sun seems to be shining.
no, it's photographer's dream, complete cloud cover.
Right.
So it's just like a reflector board to my side. But sort of, I feel the cold terribly. Don't love. I've got a fire on right next to me.
Oh, okay. It is still kind of summer, isn't it?
I know. But there is a fire glowing next to me. And we're all very aware of, the heating situation. So we had a massive redwood that had to be taken down beginning of this year because it had died, climate stress. So we have a great deal of firewood to keep ourselves warm this winter.
Well, that's good
So
for
I
you.
thought we could afford to start early.
Well, so whereabouts do you live?
I live in Surrey, which is a beautiful county, which is what they call the home counties. And the home counties are all the areas all around London. And so I am the county that is directly below London.
Yes, it's a beautiful part of the world there.
I can get to London in 30, 35 minutes. So that's easy by train.
Yeah, just expensive.
Yes. Very expensive. There's no two ways about it. It's expensive to buy. It's expensive to stay. It's expensive to do anything. But then, you burn your own logs and you grow your own food.
So where did you grow up?
in this area. This was where I grew up. And I had no intentions of ever coming back to this area ever again. I thought it was beautiful, but it wasn't for me. I'd moved to London. I loved my life in London, and I probably never would have left if it wasn't for possibly two things. One was I love the countryside, and the other was I met Nev. So I blame him. And we were looking to move out of London, and then my mum got into quite a bit of trouble, which is a very long, boring story. But basically we came to live very close to her to take care of her physically, emotionally, and financially, really. That's how I ended up back in the area I grew up in.
Oh, it's nice to come back to your roots.
Well, I didn't like it at all at first. Nev loved it. I was like, oh, it's not multicultural enough, and it's so quiet, and I was just missing the fact I could see all my friends in fringe shows and things like that in town, just see them so easily. And I was missing the cutoff, whereas, of course, the writer's job is to be a recluse, really.
Yep.
So Nev was just fine. So for the first couple of years, I think I found the transition quite difficult. But I love every bit of it now, because we sort of made everything that we're doing to suit our own lives now. And I have to say, during lockdown, I was really, really glad that we were in the countryside, and it just meant I could still take the dogs for long walks without meeting people, without worrying that I was going to bump into someone and you pick your walk. But it was nice to be able to have that space, whereas if I'd stayed in London, that would have been much more difficult to handle, I think.
Did you have dogs in London too?
No, because I had a first floor apartment. I could have had probably a dog, but no, I had an apartment with a garden, but I just never felt there was the space. I never felt there was the time, to be honest. And it was Nev who knew I so wanted dogs, and I'd missed dogs. And I said, oh, but how do we do that with our schedules and this? And he said, oh, we'll just make it work. And you do. And I can't believe I went so long without having a dog again.
Following you on Twitter, dogs are a real passion of yours, and the protection of animals in general, but also dogs. So
yeah,
why the love so much of animals?
I don't know. I've always had it. Yesterday, I had to rescue a robin. So I had a little robin in my hands. Oh, the feeling of that. I felt it was like little Marnie, who I rescued. It felt like she weighed 1 ounce, and you've got this little heart beating, and it's just, really we're all a part of nature, however much we might want to deny it. We are all dependent upon each other. And I suppose my passions, my charities are those, for those who cannot help themselves. And that's what charity is all about anyway. But particularly, animals and children who don't have the ability to defend themselves in the way that us adults can or attempt to. I, as a child, would go around rescuing animals in the garden, in my parents' garden, because my father built a conservatory and all the birds just kept flying into it. So it was a disaster. And I would just go out on patrol and collect these birds that had concussed themselves, particularly if it was in the snow. And I'd bring them in and I'd rescue them. And I rescued dozens and dozens of birds that were saved by the fact that I went out and collected them. And we only lost one, and it had to have a full burial, I just, there's a wonderful, I don't know whether you get his show, Super Vet. Have you heard of Super Vet?
No, I haven't.
He has a huge show in Great Britain, and he lives not far away from us here in Surrey. His practice is here. And he takes animals that everyone have gone, there's nothing you can do about this animal. And he saves them, does incredible surgeries, rescues them. And he's been a pioneer in animal surgery. And also in the fact that animal surgery and human surgery should be related because we can learn so much from each other. Some of the techniques he's used for limbs for dogs are now being used for limbs for humans. So he said that when you rescue an animal, you rescue yourself. And I thought, gosh, what a clever phrase, really, because it is that opening of your own heart and that giving, that patience, that understanding with an animal that's traumatized, that just, it lifts your own soul. You just feel like you've done something good for the day. You've just tiny little contribution to this planet. But it feels like such an incredibly important thing to do. To be caring for the old woman who lives up the road who doesn't have anyone who visits, caring for the gentleman you nod to who's always buying his newspaper, whose name you don't know, but you know that nod is important to him. Just that caring awareness of everything. I definitely feel my animals and my plants are my saving grace in every sense.
One thing I love about animals is watching my son. He has autism, and I love him. He has such a connection with animals. He sort of stops, and you can see that tangible connection between them. It's really good for his emotional regulation, calms him right down. And we don't have any pets because we travel a lot. But sometimes I think, oh boy, it would be nice to have an animal that he could just connect with a lot, because they're so good for him and his emotional regulation. It's amazing to watch, actually.
It's very true. I've read a lot about that connection, particularly between autistic children and animals, and it is, as you say, very palpable. You can see that. So where do you travel? All over Australia or all over the world?
The last couple of years, we've bought a caravan and we travel all over mainland Australia. So,
wow.
We're due to go away again soon, but the pandemic obviously put some of our plans on hold, and we were actually on the road at the time. So and because Australia closed all their state borders, we were kind of stuck in certain places during that time. So it was interesting, but now that everything's calming down, we can sort of get back out again.
Well, you can take a small dog with you. You can get a small one.
I was going to say, there's some animals love travelling.
True.
They do, yes. Find a travel happy one.
But the thing is, in Australia, there's animals wherever you go. So wherever we stop, the kangaroos and wallabies always come up to us, and even in certain parts, there's emus as well. And
half of them want to kill you, as all my English friends say.
You stay away from the snakes, but the wallabies and kangaroos are fine.
So as well as having a passion for animals when you were young, I believe you also had a passion for dance and ballet.
Yeah, I think dance, music, ballet, just dancing, enjoying life in a weird way. I wanted to be a ballerina. And my parents used to dance, as in two people who'd never learnt to dance, but that generation always went to dances. And so there was often a lot of music in the house and my parents dancing together. My father was incredibly romantic, for a businessman, entrepreneur. He was very romantic. And so he would always be putting the music on and playing music on the piano, self-taught, to my mum. So they had their favorite pieces, and so that sort of that connection to the joy of life, really, I think, was what dance was for me, and expression, because my mum was deaf. So ballet was a way of sort of expressing acting, but without the words.
Yep. I was watching you recently, actually, in an episode, and just having learned that you were a dancer, I could actually see how you move, because dancers move and walk in a particular way, and you just have a litheness to you, which I thought, So how many years did you dance for, and why did you stop?
I started when I was about 4, and I stopped when I wasn't allowed to go to ballet school, pretty much. So I'd wanted to go to ballet school because I was sort of a year ahead in school, so I was 11. So I'd done all the auditions for going to what would have been senior school, middle school, to go to ballet school at that time. And my dad had slightly mistakenly thought, oh, just let her audition. She won't get in. This is just a dancing thing. All girls want to dance or ride ponies or something, and just let her do it. And then she won't, and it'll fall by the wayside, and we'll just get on with her proper education. But of course, I got into them all. So then that created a bit of an issue. And my dad very clearly did not want me to go to ballet school because I was academically bright, and all the school was saying, oh, that would be a terrible waste of a good brain, because they weren't thinking about being an artist or creative or anything. And so I didn't get to go. And then it was like, well, what's the point in dance? I was heartbroken. I think I was a pretty depressed young girl. And because I wasn't doing it, I just had lost the joy, because all my childhood, I thought I was going to be a ballerina. And if I wasn't going to go to ballet school, then I wasn't going to be able to be a ballerina. So I just stopped. My mum tried to get me to take up tap and jazz dance. And I was like, yeah, okay, but it's not ballet. So I just really wasn't interested. And then finally, my mum got me to audition for some amateur dramatics where they were doing Fiddler on the Roof. And she said, well, they need people who can sing and dance, and they need all the children. And I was like, whew. And my mum was, do you think you can act? And I was like, well, yes, of course I can act. And I said, but this says, you have to be 18 to join the company, and I'm 13. So how can I join? She said, well, act. So that's really when my sort of interest in acting began, out of the ballet. So I went to audition for one of the children in Fiddler on the Roof, and I ended up playing the second youngest daughter, not the youngest. And the woman who was 21, who was shorter than me, but she was 21, she was playing the youngest daughter. And there I was, probably about 14 by the time the production happened, playing the second youngest daughter. And that's when I got the bug for acting, because I just loved every second of it. And considering I only had like 5 lines, I felt like I was in the whole show, because I was with the family all through that story and their journey, and I was living every second of the journey, crying my eyes out, peeling potatoes, being terrified of the Russians. I was living it completely. And I thought, oh, I love this. This is like being a prima ballerina, because even though you may not have the spotlight on me, I am living, eating, breathing this production completely. I was immersed. And that's kind of, then it became a pact between me and my dad that when I finished my education, I would be allowed to go to drama school. And probably, I don't know, without my mum saying, go on then, go off and do that dancing, acting in this hour dramatics, maybe I wouldn't become an actor. I don't know. But certainly that's where I first sort of got the bug for it.
So at what point your father realised the talent you had and appreciate that, there's creators in the world to be appreciated?
I think he was quite a long time before even with drama schools. So I auditioned for all the main drama schools. And because I was a year ahead in school, I sort of auditioned when I was 17. And sort of on principle, despite the auditions going well, they went, yes, but you're only 17. And, we really don't like to take people that young because you haven't had a life, was the response I got back. Not that they said it to my face then. They weren't honest enough to say that. They just said, thank you. And then I got this letter back from all of them saying the same thing. We love you very much. Come back in a couple of years, in a few years' time, when you've experienced some life. And I was like, even the waiting of a year just seemed so long. How could I possibly do that? So I went back 3 months later with a different look and another name.
At a different age as well?
I had aged 3 months, I think. So my birthday had moved. So I think I tweaked it. I think the whole, most of the form was a bit of a dodgy form. And so I went back. None of them seemed to recognize me from before. And so this would have been not for the September intake, the beginning of the year, but for the following year's intake, not the following September, but the following February or April, whichever ones they did, because a lot of the schools did 2 intakes a year. And I went back and I'd sort of got a feel for each of the schools. So I did very different auditions for each one. So for Central, I tied my hair in lots of little plaits the night before, wore loads of dark black eye makeup, really big, kohl eyeliner, and frizzed my hair out to here, like I had some mad perm. And I wore slashed jeans, and I talked like that. I went into the audition, and that was my voice. And so then, when I did my Shakespeare, they thought, blimey, what a good voice she's got. She can do RP. But I did my own audition like this because I like them, salt of the earth, tough, people who go out and fight. So I was like really tough in my audition, and I kicked the chair into the middle of the room, and I went, for those who can't beat, see, that's the beat chair is going to be the log in this scene, right? That's my tree. Right. Are you ready? I was like, and they were like, what's going? And then I did my very best Shakespearean voice, and they went, wow, because they like them rough. So that was my Central school. And then Webber Douglas, where I chose to go in the end, were very classical orientated. So even my modern piece, I chose a very classical piece. I wore my full-length practice skirt for all of my pieces. And I was very polite and this and that. And they looked at my thing and they said, you are very young. And I was still young because they like to take them 20, 19, 21 after university or whatever. And I was like, and they said, gee, you've not really had much life experience. And I said, oh, please, don't judge me by the number of birthdays I've had, but by the events that have occurred between them. I have no idea where that came from, but so they were like, oh, have you had an eventful life? I said so many things I just can't talk about, really, And so they had this great sense that I had been through drama already in my life. And so I just replayed them all, and I got into every single drama school 3 months later. And then I had to so I had to sign up under a different name. And then I had a scholarship, which I got from the local thing, which was, of course, was in my real name. I was like, well, how do I tie my scholarship? It was a bit complicated, but we sorted it in the end. And there was one audition guy who realized what I was doing. In the sense, he didn't realize it was the same person from before, but he was on the panel, the board, for both Webber Douglas and Central. And I'm so short-sighted. It was only when I went to sit down and have the chat after I'd done some stuff and I'd done my pieces, and they said, oh, do come and sit down. And now you're sitting either side of a table. And I could see he was on the table, and I thought, oh no, what if he recognizes me from last week's audition in Webber Douglas? Because I was sort of posh and classical there. And when I went to Webber Douglas, I saw him. I was never taught by him, but I saw him. He was in the local pub, and I went up to him and I said, thank you for not blowing my cover. And he went, oh, thank you. It was the most interesting thing that happened in a very dull day. I suppose they've got to listen to 500 people doing the same speech. And he said, no, I realized that you were the same person. And I thought, if she can do that and do this, this is somebody we should have. in our school. So he said, but I didn't say anything to them. I just gave you the vote, you know.
So you faked your age to get your first job in Fiddler on the Roof. You faked your personality to get into drama school, and then you faked your nationality to get your first job on Doctor Who.
Face it, acting is all about faking anyway. It's about faking it convincingly, you know. So convincingly, you think it's not a fake; it's completely authentic.
So for the Doctor Who role, did John Nathan Turner know you weren't American, or did you actually just become American for that role?
He thought I was American because they were only auditioning Americans and Canadians. So my agent, who wasn't my agent at the time, had seen me in drama school playing an American part in No No Nanette, and had then rung me 2 weeks after I left drama school saying, I want to put you up for this role in Doctor Who. And after a sort of mistaken identity phone call, because I thought it was a friend playing a prank. I mean, who rings you up after you've left drama school to say, I want to put you up for a companion in Doctor Who? That doesn't happen. So I thought it was a joke, but once I realized he was a real person, we had this conversation. I said, look, but I'm not American. He said, well, I thought you were, and I didn't think anybody else was in that production. So would you be willing to go to an audition and just pretend to be American through the audition? And I went, sure, if you think I'm right for it, then yeah, let's go for it. And on the understanding that if I got the part, which was this 1,000,000 to 1 shot anyway, but if I got it, that it would then be explained to the producer, the director, or whoever was involved, because I knew very little about who was involved, that it would be explained to them that I was, in fact, English, and that would be fine. So I went in doing my American and under the expectation that this would all be revealed, but then it never was. I think my agent got cold feet because I said, once I got it, I said, so when are we going to tell them? He said, well, not just yet. Let's get the contract, which, you understand. I understand that. Let's sign that. That makes sense. And then I found out I was going on breakfast TV, and I went, I can't go on breakfast TV. All my aunts and uncles will be watching. They'll probably ring in and complain. Friends will ring in. I can't just go on breakfast TV and pretend to be American. And he went, well, hopefully the contract will come before then, but I don't know, maybe it had or it hadn't. I don't know. But then I had to go onto breakfast TV, and I thought, well, I'm just going to dumb it down a bit. I'm going to, dull it out to make it sound not like a very strong accent. I'd been much stronger in the audition. And, but I had to do it. And I was terrified. I wasn't just terrified of being on the show. I was terrified somebody was going to ring up and say, she's not American. What's going on? This is just like nonsense. So, and I have no idea why nobody did. So, yeah. And then it was like, well, are you going to tell him before we start rehearsals? Because it was then quite a long gap before we actually started the job. And there was like 3 months between me getting it and me doing breakfast TV. So it hadn't been told then. I was like, when are you going to tell them? And he said, well, I think it's best we do the first story. And I was like, okay. So I just had to be in rehearsals everywhere, all the time, using an American accent. And then eventually, I'd done the first 3 stories and we had the break. And I went to see my agent and I said, are we ever going to tell him? He said, well, it's a bit awkward too now, isn't it? And I was kind of left with well, I guess it is. Yes. Right. Thank you. So it did. It felt very, very awkward because I felt like it was okay and it was fun doing it in the audition. But doing it for the rest of the time was a real strain. And then I felt like I was lying to people. And that felt really odd. And I would just try and avoid it all the time when people would ask you questions. Because also, John Nathan Turner knew that I was married, but he didn't want me to say to the world that I was married. So I was, pretending to be American and single while I was in fact, British and married. I just felt I was more acting off screen than on, really.
I guess the fact you were already lying for John Nathan Turner, did that make you feel a bit better about the fact that you were lying to him as well?
I suppose. I don't, the thing is, I don't want to feel like it's lying, because I never said I'm American.
Just embodied the character.
I just went in with an American accent, and my agent's the one who said, I have an American actress. I never went in and said, I am American. But of course, you don't need to, because the person has arrived and they're speaking with American accents. So I didn't have to say that, but it just felt weird. And by the time it got to do breakfast TV, where people are interviewing you and saying, so where are you from? And I'm like, oh, this is just horrible. That was when it was like, okay, it's bad enough trying to not look nervous when you're doing an interview, let alone not look nervous because you're not actually yourself.
So who worked it out first? Who found out first?
Well, the first person who was told was Colin Baker. And I told him. And that's because Colin and his wife Marion had invited me and my husband Scott to dinner. And Scott was American. He had been a Broadway's musical star. And I'd said, oh, I can't go and lie to my friends. I can't go into their house and do this. This just feels awful. And so he said, well, don't. We'll just take them into our confidence. And so when we got to the door, we knocked on the door of their house and we answered the door, and I said, hello, in a British accent. And he went, oh, you don't have to put on a British accent to come in. I said, no, this is my real voice. And then, we sat down and we chatted, and I explained how, yes, obviously my husband's American, but I'm not. And told them the whole story, which they thought was brilliant and wonderful. And Colin was like, I won't say a word. It's my secret. Yeah, it's fine. And so he knew for the following, the rest of the filming. It was only after he left and he was then doing an interview with the press. And he said, can I mention it in the press? And I think I'd left by that point too. And I said, yeah, sure. But it just kind of got like, it was kind of a meh at the end of his interview, a bit to John Nathan Turner, I felt, in a way. It was like, and Nicola's English anyway. No. It was all, to do with what had happened with the hiatus and why he'd left and why he wasn't doing regeneration. And so it kind of, everyone sort of ignored what was said because it just didn't seem very particularly relevant. But that's when it was announced. And I presume that John Nathan Turner read that and saw that. We never had a conversation about it. He never asked me. He never went, were you lying to me? Were you hiding this? Maybe he thought it was quite funny. He never said. It's a strange one. I'm surprised there wasn't a point where he one day went, but he didn't.
So you saw John many times after that, but he never raised it ever?
No, never said anything.
Okay.
Well, you've had me fooled, Nicola, because I saw you a little bit after Doctor Who, I think, in Australia at that time. You were in Blackadder. And
yes.
What was your brief in that role? Was it to make the most, make people cringe with that laugh that you had? But
Yes.
I remember thinking that, oh boy, she's doing a really good English accent there.
Exactly. That was what a lot of people thought. And it was that thing where what I would have been obvious casting for, people from Surrey, Jilly Cooper novels that were being made at the time, I couldn't get an audition because they were like, no, she's American. And my agent would say, no, actually, she's English. No, we've seen her. We know she's American. So it was a really bizarre thing. I mean, my first West End job, I was playing American. Everything I was doing was American. So I kind of got stuck in that little niche for a while.
Yep. Now, you've had a huge voiceover career, and you've demonstrated already the range of voices you have. How many voices and accents do you do? Have you ever worked out?
No, because there's always a new one to learn as well, in the sense that someone will come up with something obscure that you've not done before. And then you go, right, okay, well, I better learn that one then. I played Greenham Common Girl, which was all about the sort of Falklands War era. And I had to be from a particular part of Leicester. And I thought, well, I played Leicester Theatre and all that. And I used to have this wonderful woman who did any voices I wanted to study. She would work with me to get them. And so when you've got somebody like that you know you can go to, you're not intimidated by any accents. And I've got that musical ear, so I hear it all as music anyway. So I would go to her and say, right, now I've got to do this. I've got to do Birmingham. I've got to do New Zealand. I've got to do whatever. And then you just get a phrase. And then once you've got that phrase, you're just in that sort of groove, really. So I've never really counted, but quite a few.
So for about 80 stories now, you've come back to Big Finish to put on your American. So I
can't believe it. I thought when Nev put all these out for me, because I just got back from my appointment, and I said, oh, if you put more than one of each one out? He went, no, and that's not all of them either. And I was like, I can't have done that. Of course I have done loads.
So how was it you were approached to come and work for Big Finish?
Oh, it's just a celebration working for Big Finish. It's just a joy. I get to play Peri continuously. And I suppose, I mean, it is, I always describe it as a pair of comfy old slippers that you just pop on, and I don't have to worry about what does she sound like, what does she think, what's her process and what's she been through, because I know Peri. And so the only thought I've ever had to really do was when I was doing Piscon Paradox and doing the older and the younger Peri, thinking about, well, how dynamically do I want to make that difference? And now we have quite a few stories with the older Peri.
Yes.
So I do still, when I'm playing predominantly the younger Peri, raise my vocal level up slightly higher than I am and slightly lighter so that it has more youth to it, and then take it even lower when I'm playing the much older Peri. And really that's it in terms of preparation and work for doing it. I mean, my approach with Big Finish is like, hurrah, what's the story? Who am I with? that's literally it.
Now after you left Doctor Who, you came back and played similar characters with Colin. So you still did a bit of work with Colin with the Miss Brown audio visuals. You did an audio story during the hiatus, Slip Back.
Yes.
Was that? Had you done much audio work before that? Or was that one of your first audio stories you'd done?
That was my first professional audio. In drama school, we'd done some audio work, and predominantly it was stage work. We'd done nothing for television, so the thing you end up doing. I'd got my only television experience had been holding the boom in the summer holidays while the year above me were doing a television project. So they got to do a television project and we didn't get a television project. So I kind of got to hang out and work with them on the sort of technical side, but I didn't get to do any sort of in front of camera work at all. So I'd done some audio, we'd done some radio plays in drama school. So I had a little knowledge, but very little. I'd not really done any audio work before. So it was great fun to go in and do that and see everyone. And I thoroughly enjoyed doing it.
It would have been a different process recording for that radio player as opposed to Big Finish? They have the booths and things like that. So would you have all been standing around the microphone, or have a couple all in the one room?
Yes, there was I think there was like 3 mics, and you'd have sort of 2 people per mic, and there's all that turning away to turn your page and then coming back and all that quiet stuff you do, and then stepping back and forwards for voices as well. So you were doing a lot more than everything is done for you in Big Finish. You don't even have to fade your voice as you go down a corridor. They want you to keep everything even, and they will do the corridor and the feet sounds, and all of this is put on afterwards. You do still need to shout and scream occasionally. And obviously, you do your out of breath acting and all of that, but it was a very different setup. And I just learned by watching, really. It was just a case of looking at everyone and going, oh, I see. So they step back and they do their script that way. Nobody said, have you ever done any of this before? Shall we give you some techniques? No one did it. You just watch, learn, copy. But yes, a completely different setup from Big Finish.
Doctor Who, The Church and the Crown.
Is this really another time?
Yes, and place. Paris, 1626 to be exact. Good few centuries after your time.
For the Church and the Crown.
Richelieu had a vision for uniting the cultural diversity.
Richelieu? Wasn't he the bad guy?
No. Quite the opposite. Alexander Dumas has a lot to answer for.
Run me through Del Mar, and 50 will step forward to take my place.
50 of the Cardinal's guards to 1 King's musketeer. Hardly a challenge, Morin.
How many more reports must I read of skirmishes on the streets? 12 in the last week alone.
What should I care if a few hotheads are getting carried away?
Our men are tearing each other to shreds!
Such beauty.
Are you talking to me? Could she have gone back to your TARDIS?
Oh, I doubt it. Sensible just isn't in Peri's vocabulary.
I don't know.
There she is. Take her.
Hey! Get your hands off me! Why would anybody take Peri? Doctor! Doctor! Help!
Would it help if I said I have to gain an audience with the King on a matter of national security that may even threaten the life of Queen Anne?
Then I'd say that you are more of a fool than you look. The King is preparing for the state ball this evening and will see no one, especially a peasant like you.
My ball will bring together every French aristocrat in one room. Tonight, we shall see France unified in my name.
I am the Princess Erimem of Karnak. May I present the Doctor, my royal vizier and chief advisor?
Dressed like that? I thought he was your jester.
I work for a higher purpose, as well you know.
No, Cardinal! You work for me! Do not forget that!
For the unity between the Church and the Crown to survive this night, the madness must stop!
Now, sir, prepare to face the sword of Patrice Delmar. En garde!
Oh, dear.
Now, was it Gary Russell who invited you to come and first work with Big Finish, or how did the whole Big Finish thing come about? Did you trust it in terms of brand new company doing Doctor Who? How did you feel about the whole process?
Well, I knew Gary and I met Jason and I sort of I didn't have any doubts. I probably should have done. I'm not a doubting person. Honestly, I say this now and I'm thinking about something that happened recently. I think I really should ask more questions. But I just kind of I'm always a yay sort of person. So I was just up for it. And our first studio had this sort of corrugated plastic roof. So every time it rained, not forgetting what country we're in, it was so noisy that you couldn't record. So we literally had to record when it wasn't raining. That was our very first studio, which was interesting. And because it was this plastic it was like a shed, really. We were on a glorified shed on stilts. And because it was also this sort of plastic roof, it was like being in a sauna when the sun came out. So one particularly hot day, I remember us all joking. I said, I really need to be in my, Planet of Fire outfit now. because it was just so hot. It was just like sweat pouring off of us. All having to stop because, it's raining, stop. Oh, and taking a sort of 2-hour coffee break. Oh, it stopped, right, quick, here we go. So it was very primitive when we started. But then I heard the first story come out and I thought, wow, this is great. These guys have done a really great job. And I thought, yes, I want to hear more. So I'm sure other people will feel the same way.
Very few actors get the privilege of working against 2 doctors, and because you spanned from the 5th to the 6th Doctor, it meant Big Finish had double the stories you could do with double the Doctors.
Yeah.
What's it like in terms of process, in terms of how Colin works and Peter works?
They do have very different working techniques, and I daren't describe all of those details in case somebody wants to sue me. But let's just say Colin is very thorough with his reading the script and knowing what's happening and asking questions, and if anything isn't quite the way he thinks it should be, he'll say, and he's really on board. And Peter's not the same. It's probably the best way to put it.
Is Peter very intuitive as he reads the script for the first time?
That's a very, very, yes, let us say this. Let us say perhaps so intuitive it's nearly improvised. Yes. I mean, he does a great job of just reading a script, but there is often this sense that he may not have read it prior to the recording, which I suppose depends on his schedule, etc. But it's a different process for him, but it's always the same process for me. I'm just playing Peri, and I know my process, and I know. I do less now than I used to. I used to read the whole script through, nothing. Then I'd read the script through and just think about Peri. Then I'd mark up all my bits on the script. And then depending upon how much time it was between when we did it and when I'd marked it up, I might read it again. Now I don't need to do that process in the same way because it's, so much is embedded. But I wouldn't read it less than twice. So that's sort of where I am.
Now, early days for you, they added a second companion for Peter Davison with Caroline Morris and Ehrman. And the two of you had a particularly, I think there were some glorious, glorious stories that you had. And the two of you kind of took over the show, in as much as there's even episodes where Peter doesn't even appear because we don't need him anymore.
Yes.
What was it like in terms of having that sort of relationship with a second woman, another actress, and the journey that they were taking you on?
Yeah, I really enjoyed having Ehrman, and it was a wonderful excuse to sort of play mini doctor in a way. Sort of Peri becomes like the mini doctor explaining everything to her because she's from a different time, from a different period, from a different culture, and being the big sister to Ehrman was a lovely way to for Peri to evolve. So I thoroughly enjoyed all of those stories. And there's, I know I've read somewhere that there's the Big Finish say, oh, well, there's only a limited amount that you can do in that period. But I always feel there's unlimited because it's Doctor Who. And I think Ehrman added to that unlimited feel because we were able to go in a direction because we had Ehrman. But I'm sure there's plenty more that we could still do in that era. But I haven't done a Peter one for ages, incredibly long time. But then I'm really glad that we also developed the much older Peri with Colin's Doctor, which has been a lovely development for me.
Yeah, it has been. So you did a couple of, there's a couple of times you started doing some directing. You directed a unit story. What was it like getting on the other side of the mic?
Oh, I loved it. I really loved it. I think, as an actor, we all know that we always just want to give our very best performance. And because it's audio and I'm not worried about a set or any of these things. You know, I had to be involved in the music and stuff. And I think they probably got a bit tired of how picky I was and going, no, can we do this? Can we change that? Can we do this? So I had very strong opinions about the music. But I just really enjoyed nurturing my fellow actors and trying to get the very sort of best performance out of them. I think it was my second directing when I directed David Tennant and Nick Courtney. And Nick was going to he was sort of giving me a bit of a hard time in a cheeky way, in a fun, jovial way. And he went, oh, female directors, I'm not sure about them really. You know, I was like, okay. But there was a scene, and I think he was in that one too, where there was David Tennant and an actress whose name's gone from my head. I could probably find it somewhere. And the level of fear.
Siri O'Neill?
Yeah. Siri. And I thought I must be thinking the wrong name, because now Siri means something else completely different, doesn't it? So thought my brain had just misfired there. So yes, and I wasn't really getting a level of fear and, you know, in this scene that I wanted. So I decided, because there was like sirens and alarms going off, they were on the plane and the plane was going to crash and everything was going to blow up. And it was really loud. But when they're recording it, of course, they've got none of those special effects. And we did 2 or 3 takes and it wasn't quite going right. And so I said, right, on the next take, having checked this with the engineer, I am going to make all of the noises. And I did. I made the sirens, the alarms, the voice saying, self-destruct, you know, and all this just sort of stuff. 10, 9, yeah, boom, was making so much noise that it meant they had to act over the top of me. And I sort of, so it gave that level of tension. And afterwards, we had what I was looking for in the scene. And both David Tennant came up to me and thanked me for doing that. And Nick Courtney put a little thing in his autobiography, apparently. Right at the end, he wrote, he just worked with me, and he wrote how he'd love to work with me again. And I thought, wow, that was so sweet. But he said, it's what you managed to do in that scene that made me go, wow, that was really great. You had 2 choices. You could either have, you know, humiliated someone saying they're no good, or you could have just accepted it the way it was and gone, oh, well, that scene's just not really going to work. He said, but you didn't. You just brought the whole thing up. No, everybody walked off feeling, wow, that was really great. We did something brilliant there. Of course, the poor engineer who had me screaming and shouting in his ear in the room was not so. But he said, no one's ever done that before. I'll have to remember that.
Was that recorded by any chance, your sound effects? Is it somewhere in the Big Finish archive?
I don't think so, because there wasn't a mic in the engineer's room. You don't tend to record that booth. So no. And I think it would obviously cause problems because you don't want that recording to be going on the disc. So, and you have to make sure that there's no bleed from the headphones onto the microphone.
Unit at the beginning, weren't you? It's only fair you show up for the end.
Unit isn't ending.
We go now live to Colonel Chaudhry of the UN's Intelligence Task Force, who's on the scene.
How the hell do I explain that our CO's missing? And just to make it more interesting, we've lost an alien spaceship.
ISIS won't go away either. Watch your back there.
Thanks for the assistance, Colonel...
Dalton.
You're replacing Colonel Brimacombe Wood?
Lieutenant, pass the word among the lads that effective immediately, I'm the new CO.
Pizza Hut.
Very funny, Hoffman.
Technically, I think you'll find that's boyish charm.
Do you know what that's like, to lose everything?
Hold me right there or I'll shoot. You're gonna shoot me anyway. It's been a real pleasure knowing you.
Colonel?
I'm back in charge and I'm in a bloody foul mood, so kindly move your asses!
What was it like meeting David Tennant? Because this is before he's taken his meteoric rise to fame, and he would have just adored you as a fan.
He did.
So what was it like meeting him? I mean, was he all fanboy?
He was a bit. He was fanboy trying to control. He was fanboy, really. But he, as he always is, a very warm and charming person, and a lovely actor. Great to work with because he, produces the goods. He knows his. He knows the machine. He knows how to bring the best out of his own instrument, and he was wonderful to work with and great fun. And we had a lovely time chatting in our lunch breaks.
So why haven't you done more directing?
Maybe they don't want me back after the amount of time over the music. This could be true. And I suppose this might sound like a really odd thing. It's a level of commitment to do that as an actor. I was always aware that I'm then committing to being available to do this for the next 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks, that time. And as an actor, I was worried about making that commitment because then I would have to possibly miss acting work because I've committed to doing the directing. Whereas if I rang up Big Finish and I said, look, I'm sorry, I've got this job. I've really got to do this. I know that they'd let me pop into a studio on another day and lay down my tracks and they'd still have their product. But if I agreed to do the directing, you can't pull out and say, I'm sorry, I've got this job. Or at least you certainly couldn't in the days when I did it.
Yeah. Because
they didn't have so many other people to stand in. They had such a small pool. So I think that was a huge influence on my sort of deciding not to do more. I thoroughly enjoyed, and I spent way too long over everything. I know I did. And everyone was kind of like, you can do this a bit faster, that you don't have to be responsible for this bit. I said, no. So probably, I'm sure if I said I want to, they would find me some.
I'm sure they would, because I mean they're looking for more female directors all the time, and people like Louise Jameson, Helen Goldwyn have been doing Jane Slavin have been doing amazing jobs, and women bring a different feel and touch to audios, both in the writing and the directing, and we need more of them. So maybe if life starts to be quieter for you, you should just tap Nick on the shoulder and say, "Hey, Nick."
I suppose the thing is, I've got things I want to do, and it's that difficult thing, isn't it? I've got a calling to write certain things that I need to complete, and I have put them off and put them off and put them off. And I now feel that it's my duty to that piece of work, that creativity, to finish this thing before I take on something else, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, it does.
I feel that if I, there's lots of other things I could be doing, and I know that this is essentially unpaid for me to stay at home and do this thing, but the voice of this thing calling me to do it, having been a quiet grumble with little bits thrown in, and I just add a bit and add a bit, is now just getting so loud that it's in the background all the time saying, come on, you have to do this. So I think I have to honor those things, finish those things, and then maybe I will. Yes, definitely.
Right. It's about 14:85. I'm heading for a little tavern on Fleet Street called the Kingmaker to do a little detective work. Someone once told me it can be a useful place to find out all sorts of stuff. You can't miss it, just head for St. Paul's Cathedral. The old Norman one, not the one with the dome. That's not there yet. I'll meet you there in 3 hours' time, and don't be late.
Greetings, Earl Rivers. I greet you in the name of the new king.
And greetings to you, Lords Gloucester and Buckingham. Well, what can I say? This is a most lovely surprise.
Good evening, sir. I am Susan, and I will be your serving wench for this evening. Would you like to sit in carousing or non-carousing?
Ha ha! Less of the Mr. Clary, Doctor. They'll start to think me a gentleman. Don't stand on ceremony, Doctor. Folks call me One-Armed Clary, don't they, boys?
Peri, is it a custom of this age for a man to place a hand on your bottom as a form of greeting?
Not really, no. Aramem, did you just break that guy's arm?
Yes.
For your information, sir, this is my travelling machine, my magic cabinet that takes me to places beyond your imagination.
So you're a demon, are you?
That depends. Do they burn individuals that show sign of devilry in this century?
Yes.
Well, in that case, I am a wise and benevolent sorcerer.
He's some kind of robot. His arms are soft. He seems real from this end.
Oh my god, this bit's detachable! He's not real!
Sure you're all right?
We're fine! We've got to get out of here. There's something nasty and alien happening here. We have to find the doctor.
Well, he did come out of this thing, sire, the like of which I have never seen before. And they do say that unusual portents crop up at the time of a coronation.
Who says?
Well, they do. The ones who do say. You know, they who do say.
Well, as long as we're being specific. You think I'm capable of killing a couple of kids? Murdering them in cold blood? Snuffing out a couple of young lives before they'd even begun?
Do you know what this means, Peri? It means we're not going to change history. We are history. We're part of it. It's not possible. I think we have solved the mystery. It's us, Peri. It is we who killed the princes in the tower.
Sometimes, Aramem, your ability to point out the flaws in my otherwise perfect plans errs on the irritating.
Doctor Who, you have transgressed your deadline. Your contract has been violated.
Now that's just what I thought you'd say.
Now, after you've been at Big Fish for a few years, this writer called Nev Fountain writes this piece for you called The Kingmaker.
Yes.
Now, were you and Nev a couple then? I don't know how long you and Nev have been together for.
I don't think we were. No, I wasn't. We definitely weren't. No.
So how did you two meet? Was it through this work or later on?
No, we met through an actor. I suppose we probably would have met around that time, but we actually met. Well, by met, I mean he gave me a very cursory glance.
I find that hard to believe.
No, really, honestly, it was extraordinary. He was doing a sitcom with his writing partner Tom Jameson. They did a sitcom, Elephants to Catch Eels, and the male lead was played by one of my closest friends. And he had rung me up and he said, "Nicola, you would not believe this sitcom that I'm working on right now." And so he said, "Oh, it's a BBC sitcom." And said, "It is so clever. I mean, they literally have to take some of the jokes out because there's just too many and it's too fast and it's too clever and it's intelligent and it's witty and it's bright and it's wonderful. It's the most enjoyable thing I've ever done." And I went, "Oh, okay, you know." And he said, "You've got to listen to it. The first episode's out on the radio this week." So I was like, "Okay, I'll listen to it." And so I listened to it. I thought, yes, I've actually found myself laughing out loud, which so many times people tell you it's a funny comedy, it's a sitcom on the radio, and you listen and you've smiled, but you haven't laughed. You've smiled through it, but you haven't laughed out loud. Whereas with this show, I really did. So he rang me back up and he said, "Oh, this is brilliant. You know, you have to come and see this show. We're recording, the next episode." And I wasn't very well at the time. I was a very ill time of my life. And I said, "I can't, I'm not well enough. I don't really want to come out." And he said, "You've got to, you've absolutely got to. I'm going to make you come." And so he made me come. And I was ill, pale. I could barely walk. I had 2 sticks. And I went to this show. And then afterwards, he introduced me to Tom and Nev. And that was Tom, and that was Nev, and that was it. Thought nothing more of them. And I had a writing partner of my own at the time, who then we'd written a sitcom together. And from this sitcom we'd written, he'd got a job, a permanent job, moving to my family. So he got the job. I didn't get the job because I wasn't well enough to do the job. So, but based on the sitcom that we'd written, he got this job. And so then I wanted to do another bit of writing. But obviously, because I wasn't well, I had to write only at certain times and stuff like this. So I couldn't write with him anymore. And I had this really good idea for a sitcom. And so I thought, well, who do you know who's funny? I thought, oh, yeah, there's two blokes. What are their names? Yeah. Oh, gosh. How do I find them? I don't know. So I eventually got hold of Nev's email from my friend Jamie, and I just sent him an email and said, I'm Nicola Bryant, and we met very briefly. And I got a, yeah, I know who you are thing back, I'm a very busy man. And I met him at the BBC with my, pitch in hand. And I thought he'd just take it and read my synopsis. And he sat there and he said, oh, I'm busy. I'm doing this and I'm writing this and I'm doing this. And I thought, oh, he hasn't got time for me. He hasn't got time at all. So he said, right, what's your thing? What you got? And so I handed it to him. And I thought he'd take it away and read it. And he didn't. He started to read it there and then. Because it's like he didn't have time to go away and read it. And I thought, oh, this is so embarrassing. He's doing it in front of me. This is horrible. So he's just going to tell me what he thinks to my face right now. That's horrible. That's awful. I don't want that. But anyway, that's what he did. And then he went, oh, this is rather good. I can see you Thursday evenings, 6 o'clock, 1 hour. Tuesday mornings, 8 a.m., 1 hour. I was like, yep, okay, fine. Right. So I would go, and it was very much teacher-pupil. I would go, I would take my next scenes, and he'd go, very funny, and he'd go 2 ticks and a smiley if it was A, funny, and B, was completely character driven, and I lived like a little child for 2 ticks and a smiley. If it was just 2 ticks or just a smiley, I felt, oh, damn, I haven't really got it. And that was it. I would just take my homework in, and then he'd say, right, that was great. I love those 3 scenes. Now I want those 3 scenes in one. And I go, that's impossible. I can't do that. Do, go, that was it. It was just very abrupt. Barely looked at me. It was just nothing. There was no connection. It was just he was the teacher and I was the pupil. And that was it. And this sitcom got finished, and I gave it to people, and lots of people made lots of lovely noises, and big names said wonderful things, but it never happened. That is the business.
Yep.
And then I remember Nev and I having a pub lunch or something, and him saying, so what are you doing next? And I said, oh, I'm going to write this thriller. I said, it's about pain, injury stuff, and this is the plot. And he went, oh, that's not a film, because I wanted to write the film. He said, no, that's a play. And I went, no, it's a film. It's a play. It's a film. It's a play. So in the end, I agreed to write a play with him, which didn't work out because he realized there was like a fault in it. And then we dropped that. And then eventually that became Nev's novel, Painkiller. It was sort of long after we'd done all this working together that a friend of mine, I got a stinky, horrible, disgusting, and Nev's marriage had ended. And I had a really disgusting, dribbly cold. And I was drinking garlic tea. And I had this, my friends often used to call on New Year's Eve, we'd sort of catch up and they'd always, what are you doing? And I said, oh, I've got a friend coming round with the Chinese takeaway. And so many of my friends went, but he must be in love with you, because why would you spend New Year's Eve with a snotty woman who drinks garlic tea? And I went, no, oh, yeah, horrible. Ugh, what a terrible thought. Oh, no, we're friends. We're really good friends. We like each other, But I realized when he walked in the door with the takeaway, oh, I can see there's something there. So he had a very snotty, garlicky, disgusting first kiss. Poor man.
Did he get sick?
No, he didn't. He didn't.
Oh, good immune system there.
I got better. But no, we'd known each other for ages. And in a way, that was kind of nice. We never dated. We'd been friends for a long time. We'd kind of like, I'd watched his marriage fall apart. I'd offered him my flat. I was on tour, so I said, "Oh, you can have my flat to see your kids," and we just got closer and closer, and it was
together.
It was lovely. Yeah.
How lovely.
We never went on a date and we're like, "Well, so what are you interested in? And what have you done?" We never had any of that talking about ourselves stuff. We just suddenly were.
Now, Nev is an amazing writer who manages to capture your voice really well. I guess he should now, having been together. In terms of companion chronicles, there's if anyone asks for the top 5 produced, Peri and the Piscon Paradox is usually top of nearly everyone's list in terms of one of the best ever written, and it does it for several reasons. Because it's a great story, it's funny but it also has so much emotion and heart to it, which is something that Nev managed to do. He's a writer who manages to capture everything in an hour story. What's your memories of doing? Do you remember doing that? Because it's a pretty hard. I mean, Colin is in half of it, but not very much. It's really you carrying the whole show.
No, I remember it. I remember reading it when he gave it to me, and I wanted to punch him because it was like, oh, this is going to be so tough, really tough to do. You've got to just bear yourself to do it. And but I also knew it was brilliant. So I was really grateful for the opportunity to have that kind of range in doing the show. And so I was really, looking forward to doing it, but knowing, I also wanted to have someone sensitive to work with. So I was lucky I got John Ainsworth, who's lovely as a director, to do that with me. And blessed in a way that I got a Companions Chronicle where I get the Doctor to be my guest star, because I am also having to be the other Doctor myself. But yes, and Colin was so funny in it too.
He was really hilarious, but second fiddle.
Yes, but it was wonderful. It was so, and it is that thing, isn't it? The journey as an audience member. It's that thing where with good horrors, they make you laugh before they suddenly make you jump. There's that thing where he makes you laugh before he
tears your heart out.
Yeah. And so the emotional roller coaster feels so much bigger than if you just stay on that level and then there's the sadness. It's the fact that he enables to make it so funny and yet never detracts from the journey or the characters. It's not gags for being funny. It's always true to the journey and true to the characters. It's always serving the story and serving the people, which is quite an art, I have to say.
Yeah.
Speaking of emotional roller coasters, there was one story that sticks out in my mind, and that's I think that's called The Reaping, which is Claudia Christian plays your mother.
Yes.
So
I wasn't pleased when I rang and said, "Do you want to be my mother?" What?
Yeah, she's about the same age, isn't she? So
yeah, I think she's younger than me. Yes, we're by a year or so. But yeah.
So I guess that must be interesting for you playing against American actors. I mean, you had that in your first story on television anyway. But do you feel self-conscious at all performing Peri?
No. What's really hard is to do an English accent with American actors.
Right.
Because my ear immediately tunes to the American and my brain goes, that's where you should be going. So I have to fight really hard to remain British if I'm listening to or talking to an American. That's hard. Whereas if I'm acting with another American, then I'm just very comfortable in that my ear is hearing that same sound coming back to me.
So that story was a very very emotional story in the end. What's it like having such a great backstory for Peri? You never got that on TV, but is that something you really enjoy with the character?
Oh yeah, thoroughly. I mean, you might know this story that I wrote my own backstory and gave it to John Nathan Turner. Oh, I shudder now. I go, how naive, how naive. Well, I had only just left drama school, but that's what we used to do with our characters that we played. So I'd sat down and I'd thought about Peri, and I sort of very humbly gave it to him. And I said, look, I've written all this stuff, and I just, I don't know if it's any use or whether you want me to use any of it or anything, but I just did it anyway. So I handed him this great big document, and he said, oh, thank you very much. And then he never said anything. So I was like, John, did you read? He said, oh, yes, marvelous. Whether he did or he didn't, I don't know. But he said, that's absolutely marvelous. And I said, well, should I use it? He said, yes, use it all. Use all of it. That's marvelous. So I sort of went there, with my whole backstory. But the backstory never really existed, other than I have a stepfather. I have a mother who's busy doing society things and is not that interested in me. And that was it, really, wasn't it? And I was due to go to college to study botany. That's all we know. So yes, I always had this huge backstory in my mind.
The 1984 Olympic Games will be opening.
They're coming. They're already here.
Coming soon from Big Finish Productions. Doctor Who. The Reaping.
With me here in the studio is Lieutenant Doyle of the Baltimore Police.
Thank you. The vagrant charged with the brutal murder of father of two Anthony Chambers has escaped. He's believed to still be in the Fells Point neighborhood and is on the run with an accomplice known only as the Doctor.
I need you to drive me to the police station.
Fells Point. Face the road!
Drink the coffee, Time Lord.
Doctor, we've got to go back to the TARDIS.
Do we indeed?
Someone's been murdered back home.
Can you hear the leader's voice?
Hi, Nate. Kathy? Mom?
So, you decided to show your face then?
He says soon we will all be like him.
I saw it. I saw it. Kill the Undertaker. You saw who killed Anthony Chambers.
It's alien, isn't it?
I'll say it was some kind of pod.
From space?
No, Janine, from Arkansas.
We will all be the ultimate. The perfect. The Cybermen.
You will be like us.
The human race, the universe, it isn't meant to be logical.
You are incorrect. I have studied time, and there are patterns.
Patterns?
Patterns throughout time. The order is hidden, but it does exist.
I lived in England for a while. In London, my first husband owned a pub there. The White Rabbit on the Embankment.
Yes, I know it. Now,
before he died, of course. And that must have been 7 years ago.
Yes.
Peri.
8687.
Peri. 8687.
8687. Why do people keep saying that to me?
She will be terminated.
If you're watching this, then it means I'm gone. A message from beyond the grave.
To all our listeners, we ask that you be like us. Keep safe and stay inside with your loved ones. I'm Natalie Hamilton, and you're listening to Channel VNTR, the news you can trust.
So one of the great tragedies of Colin's run on the TV coming early was one of the big things they would do was this character of softening him up. And there was a big difference in his relationship with you between the two seasons you're playing against Colin. Big Finish, of course, picked up that whole idea, and the relationship you have with Colin on audio is friendly and jovial and lovely, and there's a lot of care there. What was it like when you actually went back to do the Lost Stories and suddenly they resurrected this more antagonistic relationship?
I think weirdly we were both a tiny bit grumpy. in terms of, oh, do we have to do that again? So I think, as we always tried to do, we played against it as much as possible while accepting that we were observing, oh gosh, look at the sexism of this. Oh gosh, look at the misogyny of that. Oh gosh, look at, yes, well, it was the 80s. And just looking at the stories in the context of how far we've come. But fun in the sense that they were the lost stories and we never got to make these shows. So it was great to be able to do them, but strange to go back to that, to still sort of a little bit trapped in the bickering and less close. So whenever possible, we were just like slightly tweaking things.
We had Nabil Shaban on the show a while ago, and we talked about the Mission to Magnus remake, and I guess we were pretty horrified by how sexist it was and it's interesting in terms of, I guess it's representative of the times, but it really hurt hearing it now. And just going back and just sort of seeing, we've progressed so far in a couple of decades.
Yeah. I mean, the jump is huge. It's literally, the 80s don't feel like, and I suppose the thing is they are 40, 4 decades ago now. They feel like it's not just that was a different century. It's not just that was the 80s. It actually feels like a much bigger time gap, doesn't it? I mean, for most of us, it feels like the behavior that was perfectly acceptable in the 80s is so unacceptable now. And any of that does stand out so clearly in a script that even if you're portraying that era, you can't portray it exactly as it was without there being another character present to basically say, this is so wrong.
Yep.
That's the way we frame it now. If we do something that's set in the 80s, we show all of it, but there has to be someone there who feels this is really wrong. Whereas when we were there, you just have suck it up. This is the way life is. There was no sense of, oh, woe is me, this is so wrong. You just like, well, this is life. I'm a woman, they're a man, this is how it works.
Yep.
So yes, I think the scripts were a bit, and both Colin and I were a bit, oh. So it was a double-edged sword, really. We were very excited to have the lost stories and to be able to redo them. But visiting that 80s era was strange. I had a chat with Katie Manning actually about, because she was saying in a weird way the 60s were better because a lot of the men were trying to be gentlemen. They were busy being the gentleman. So yes, there was still all this, the women are less bright and there's all of that going on. But in a way, if you take that as misogyny and not sexism, there was more sexism in the dressing and the how they have to, we don't want them to be too clever, etc. But there was less off script and offset. There was less trouble, she felt. There was less issues to deal with in the 60s than there was in the 80s. I suppose a lot of things came to a head in the 80s. But it's interesting because she said she felt always quite protected, mostly by the men who were around her on set and everything. So, that it is fascinating to look back at these different eras, and they are so wonderfully laid out for us in these scripts of this same show through all these different periods of time.
Mm.
I was looking at that interview that Matthew Sweet did with you just before we came on this evening. And you were talking a lot about the attitudes of the 80s during that. You got very in-depth, actually, you guys. And
yeah.
It almost seemed to me like therapeutic for you. Is it good to go back and remember those things and good to talk about it, or is it painful?
I I don't know. I don't really think about it a lot because it is the past, and I don't want to spend my life there. And I didn't really expect my conversation with Matthew to go in that direction. It just did. And I think the thing was that I felt I don't have to lie. I don't have to cover for anyone. I don't have to brush this off and keep secrets and not tell people the truth anymore, because who am I protecting? What is the point of that? No, just, I can answer that question honestly, and I can say, well, this is how it was. And then that's that. I don't know if it is cathartic. I don't think so particularly. For me, it's kind of all dealt with. But I just didn't want to be on the interview brushing something under the carpet that I'd brushed under for many years that I didn't need to anymore. So I just thought, I can just be straight and say, these are some of the disappointing aspects of the 80s, and these are some of the wonderful aspects of the 80s. And I think because the fans know so much about the show and about us, that it would be disrespectful not to just be as honest as you can be in those situations. So, and because I'm so used to all the information, because it's mine and I know it and I know what happened, I really didn't expect there to be such a big whoo over it all. I just thought I'd done an interview and I thought it might be a bit dull. And then it's been quite a big response to it. And generally speaking, everyone being very positive and supportive, which has been lovely. But there were other things that I'd sat down and planned to talk about that I never got to talk about, because it's just, that's the way the journey goes. And Matthew is a very good interviewer, and he sort of, it's like he remains open to any path. And I think he suddenly felt, wow, we can actually take this over here. And we did. And I thought he was very insightful of his interpretation of things too.
Absolutely. And it was anything but dull, I can assure you of that. Philip doesn't have a Blu-ray player, so I was watching this, texting him while I was watching it, going, wow, this interview's amazing. But one day I'll show it to you, Philip.
I don't care.
You're fine if you don't have a Blu-ray player.
Thank you. I do not feel like I need to buy the entire sort of Doctor Who on another medium again.
I understand that. I think that's why they are incredibly generous, the BBC, with the amount that they put on these things, because otherwise, yes, why would you buy it in another form? You've already got it. So it really has to be that the extras are that added value. Otherwise, I don't imagine the number of people buying it would be very, very many at all.
Yeah, well, I am suffering FOMO, I will admit that.
So do you guys live near to each other at all?
No, nowhere near.
Nowhere near. Okay.
So that's better.
You can't pop out and look at you, Ray.
We've actually not met in person. Well, before we started doing this, we sort of had been in the same space for some Doctor Who conventions, but don't think we'd actually particularly had a conversation, and we didn't know each other till we started doing this 2.5 years ago.
Yep.
Wow, that's amazing. Because of course there's always that assumption, isn't it? It's like, when Americans say, I have friends in England. Do you know? Yes.
So what work are you? I mean, you've got projects you're working on. I mean, how hard is it to find work at the moment with pandemic and life?
Oh, it's difficult. I have an agent. My previous agent had decided to retire just at the point when I was nursing my mum through cancer. So that was really tricky. I couldn't take the time out to go and find someone else. So I was several years without an agent, and I just got a new agent during the pandemic. And I just met her last week, and she's very optimistic. However, she said it's one of the worst times in the industry. We do have Hollywood A-listers doing commercials, which used to be the bread and butter for actors in between things, and we're no longer paid the same money we used to be for doing commercials. And it's all that filter down. So the big television stars are doing little roles. I just watched an award-winning actress play a non-speaking, non-credited role in a BBC TV series. And I was waiting for the scene where she's in it. And I was waiting for her to have a big scene. And she never had one. That was it. She just sat on the sofa being this other actress's mum. That was it. And I thought, wow. She's not even credited. It's just I do know her. And so she's not credited. It's not even on her IMDb. I assume she was paid for it. I assume she needed the money. But if that's the place we're at, award-winning actors taking no credit, non-speaking roles, it's very, very tricky. And because people haven't worked for a couple of years, that means that you can get anyone you want for this part. So this part that would normally have gotten a B-list actor can have an A-list actor, because everybody's looking to do more work and they're saying, oh yeah, I'll do telly, I'll do this, I'll do that, I'll do. So it's tricky. And there aren't many parts for sort of women in their 50s and 60s, unless it says old woman, and then I'm supposed to be walking with a stick and a white bun and a stoop.
Yeah.
And in a way, I hope it'll just get better and better for me, because I've always said I'm a character actor trapped inside a leading lady's body. And so I'm hoping those character roles will just grow and grow as I get older. So I look forward to that, but it's it is a difficult time. But I'm optimistic, and there's so many things I want to do. But they are writing, and I know I always am the second writer in the house. So that means I'm always like, oh, Nev's doing this today, so I'm planning his food and his needs. And he needs the iPad for that meeting, and I'm going to be here, and we're going to do that. And then I realized I spent my whole day taking care of him and the dogs, my mum. And I go, what happened to your writing, Nicola? I'm very bad at just, ignoring the kids and ignoring everybody and saying, right, this is my writing time.
So you didn't set up for home recording for Big Finish?
I do. I've got a studio. Yeah, I've got a studio at home. I was one of those who was going in as much as I could, because I do like that interaction with the, when you're recording in a home recording studio, it's fine if you're doing a book, but when you're doing a drama, it's just so much nicer to be with the other actors, because you get that relationship thing happening. So I would sometimes be the only person in the studio. So it'd just be me and the engineer, and everyone else would be doing it. And people say, do you want to do that 2-hour drive? And, and I go, well, yeah, if it's okay with everybody else, because I'd rather give 100% of my thoughts to the acting, instead of just even between 1 and 5% going, have I got that on the right level? Oh yeah, my voice went too high on that. I'd rather just be the actor rather than the actor and the engineer. But a wonderful thing to have when we were all stuck, and that was the best way. And great for lots of actors who live very remotely, being able to sort of phone their performances in. So it has its place, but I don't think it belongs for every drama. And for me, it certainly doesn't belong for interviews. I want to meet the director. I want to meet the people you might be working with. I don't think you get the right flavor from just recording your scene on a phone and mailing it in.
A number of actors we've spoken to have talked about the fact that they can't stand the fact it's just record and send, and they never hear you back. There's not even the respect to actually talk to you back and give you any feedback. I mean, we were talking to Colin recently, and Colin was talking about the fact that he actually is enjoying being able to work from home,
I know, he loves
But it's interesting. I mean, to me, he seems so social that he loves people so much that is the cost he's losing. But then there's the comfort of working from home.
Exactly. And I think, I can understand that, especially when it's cold and the weather's rubbish. And there's the traffic and the queuing. And, with age, we sort of become more and more like staying at home. But I would rather go. I would rather sit in the rush hour traffic and deal with that and be in the studio than do it from home.
I think Colin likes to be in his Jimmy Jams all day.
I think he does. I think he doesn't get dressed. I think he just throws something on top and he's still in his pajamas and he's still got his like bunny rabbit slippers on. And I think we will expose him someday.
Do you listen or watch any of your stories? Or you're not, are you a person that likes to or not?
I do. I mean, lots have come recently that I haven't listened to, but I do like to listen to them, and I've usually forgotten all of them, which is what's so great. So the whole story is a surprise. You'll suddenly remember, I remember that line, but I don't remember how it ends. And you can thoroughly enjoy everybody else. And it's a great way of, traveling from A to B, putting a story in. I love them for car journeys and stuff like that. But I always forget. I always forget what happened, and I forget, because it usually is often a very long time between. And especially if you've done another story in between that one, then you remember the last one and you don't remember that one. And it's great because your memory's just gone, and you get to enjoy, you enjoy them fresh like everybody else does.
Are there particularly authors that you like, like their writing particularly for your character? Aside from Nev?
Yeah, I was going to say, not including Nev.
And lots of writers over the time. As you mentioned, The Reaping earlier. I'd love to do more with Joe. And I've worked with Johnny and James via not a Doctor Who audio, but and Jax, of course, is wonderful. Jack Rayner. I do enjoy the fact that there are some people who turn up who really know your character, and that's lovely. And then you find somebody new, like Chris Chapman's turned out to be a sort of great writer for Peri and the Sixth Doctor. And it's lovely when somebody new turns up and you go, oh, this is, and they're so enthusiastic and they bring all that new energy. And I think generally speaking, Big Finish just go out and they find great writers, and that's wonderful.
Well, we're still looking forward to what is in store for Peri in the future.
Oh, thank you. So am I.
Thank you, Nicola, so much for your time.
Oh, thank you, guys. Have a wonderful time. I look forward to hearing it.
You are Dr. John Smith and Miss Pepper Gilliam Brown?
That's us.
We are Dr. Freud 324 and Dr. Freud 326. We will be your therapist for your allotted hour.
What?
From Big Finish Productions, Doctor Who, The Sixth Doctor and Peri, Volume 1.
We don't have a lot in common.
So what do you do together for recreation?
We do like exploring.
It's quite the coincidence that you two should be looking for a lost tribe in the jungles of the Congo.
Yeah, funny that.
So you would describe your relationship as healthy?
Yes. It's our experiences that have drawn us together, made us like a well-oiled team.
What did I tell you about how dangerous it was for us to disrupt our own timelines?
Oh! I forgot! It's fine for you to do it, showing off, making yourself the center of attention. Because what? You're the Doctor. You know best.
Peri, do you believe that putting yourself in danger is a way to sustain your relationship?
No.
Come on, Peri, come on. Almost there now.
Getting Peri involved in what I do is my way of protecting her. Otherwise, she just gets bored and wanders off and ends up in even more trouble.
You can't just leave me here to die.
Oh, but I'm not going to. You need to take responsibility for your own situation.
Doctor!
Oh, don't make this any harder than it already is, Peri.
But I'm going to die.
Yes, I'm very sorry about that.
Doctor, you can't.
Big Finish. We love stories.
I'm home!
Well, that was an extraordinary chat we had there with Nicola. Thanks so much for organising it, Philip.
No, that's okay. It was a real joy to do, and can't believe how long we were able to talk.
Yeah.
And there's going to be a version that we can't release till after she's died, she's told us.
Okay.
So,
we'll make sure we organise that.
We've got half an hour of material at least to release later on. But don't think that will ever happen because she's going to be around for a long time yet.
And as I said at the outset, season 22 in particular was a very special season for me personally as a Doctor Who fan. So it was thrilling to be able to chat with Nicola about that. That's all I can say. It was great.
Yeah, we hope everyone's enjoyed it as much as we have.
Okay, so it's time for our recommendations. Now, whose turn is it to go first, Philip?
I think Nicola said it was my turn.
Did she?
Yeah, she did.
I didn't catch that in the recording, but I believe her.
So anyhow, no surprise, I'm going to recommend a Nicola Bryant story. And I think I've actually recommended this before, certainly when we did our yearly takes of the best stories. This was one of them. It's Doctor Who, the Sixth Doctor and Peri, Volume 1, which at the time I thought fantastic, because if we can have several volumes as good as this, it's going to be the best thing in the world. And we later found out that this was done especially for the 20th anniversary of Big Finish, but it came out late.
Delayed.
It was delayed. But anyhow, 4 fantastic stories. One of my favourites by Nev Fountain, so her partner. Conflict Theory, which is all about Sigmund Freud. It is so funny, so funny. But there's also a great one that explores the whole like mentality, where you like posts and things, and you've got to get likes. That's the currency on this planet. That's by Jackie Rayner, who she mentions one of her favourite authors as well. There's also 2 others. These 4 stories, all an hour long, all have different elements. But Nicola is just fantastic. Colin is fantastic. The 2 of them just sing. And so you haven't yet listened and got this, get it, because it's worth every cent. Or every pence. Or, no, those cents in America too. I don't know what they use in Germany. Or what.
Euro.
A euro. There must be something smaller than euros, though. Isn't euro the big amount?
They have cents.
Anyhow, our European listeners, let us know what you use. Anyhow, recommended. What about you, Dwayne? What are you going to recommend?
I'm going to recommend something that features Peri and Nicola Bryant performing as well. And Philip, I enjoy my short trips. And so I'm going to pick one. There was one that stood out to me. I was looking through my list and looking for ones that Nicola was narrating, of course. But this one was written by Dan Starkey, released in 2018, called The Authentic Experience. So it's about a race of people who have experimented with time travel and turned it into a bit of a tourist attraction. It's kind of along the same lines. It made me think of Carnival of Monsters, but with a different twist. But it was also Dan Starkey's name. When I saw his name, I have a real thing for his writing at the moment. He's a very quirky writer. I love the way he writes. So that combined with Nicola. And Nicola's great with her narration and voices. She does all the character work really well. It's really thoroughly enjoyable to listen to. So that's my pick. The Authentic Experience, a short trip. Very, very cheap to buy. What are the short trips going for? About $3, £3?
£3, but I think they're £2.99 at the moment.
Yeah, so definitely grab hold of that one. And that's my recommendation. There you go.
It's a good one.
All right.
Coming soon from Big Finish Productions, Doctor Who Short Trips, The Authentic Experience.
Peri's heels clanked along the gunmetal balcony on which the TARDIS had materialised, and she stopped to look down at the concourse of the spaceport below. Hordes of commuters swarmed from one transmat station to the other, some breaking away from the crowd and dashing in neurotic shoals, others trudging with a more unenthused, fatalistic air. Vast and bustling, it reminded her of being back in New York, of Grand Central Station at rush hour, but with significantly less grandeur. The overall tone of the place was grey. Grey suits and grey faces, grey directions in grey writing on grey signs, all illuminated by a filtered light that managed to be grey in its partiality. In their bright colours, she and the doctor seemed rather overdressed. But of course, that was nothing new for the doctor. "This doesn't look like a very happy place, Doctor," she observed. "Functional, I agree. This planet's a business and trading hub for this part of the galaxy, sometime rather far in your race's future. Most actual commerce and finance is managed by computers in this period." "Then where are all these guys going in such a rush?" "Oh, your species does still like to seal the deal, face to face when they can, despite telecommunications, or face to prehensile eye stalk, depending on the clientele."
Big Finish. We love stories.
That is us for this instalment of the Sirens of Audio. It has been a pleasure to be with you and to have your company, Philip.
And been a pleasure to be with you as well. And Nicola, the three of us.
Of course, yes. And so thank you all for coming along on the ride with us for this episode. Do drop a like, comment, subscribe, all those kind of things. Contact us via our socials if you want to get in touch. Leave us a comment. And we will catch you all next time.
See you.
This has been the Sirens of Audio, episode 128. 2 ticks and a smiley face, with our guests Nicola Bryant and your hosts Philip Edney and Dwayne Bunny. Original theme music composed by Joe Kramer. Our website is sirensofaudio.com. You can email us at sirensofaudio@gmail.com or contact us via any one of our socials. Thanks for listening, audiophiles. We'll hear you next time.